Okay, thanks, Josh.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Aloha to everyone, and huge mahalo for agreeing to give some of your time and wisdom to this effort. We really appreciate you stepping forward and really value your input in this process. We're obviously meeting during strange times with COVID, but we know that just like the virus isn't tired of us, even though we might be tired of it. And it's the same thing with climate change. It didn't hit pause during this whole COVID outbreak. And so our office can't hit pause either. And we really appreciate you guys stepping forward to inform this climate adaptation strategy. Just a little bit of a background about why this is important before we kick it off. The voters of this island established our office back in 2016 and really tasked us with both stopping Oahu's contribution to global overheating and preparing to defend and prepare against the inevitable impacts. And it's important to remember that even if we stopped every single emission today, we're still going to have climate impacts hit our shores, and that's why this project's so important. It doesn't mean we stop on trying to mitigate and reduce the amount of carbon pollution we put out there in our climate action. We know that every single molecule of carbon that does get burnt is going to put at risk another life. It's going to cost us another dollar to adapt, and so obviously saving on the front end is a much better course of action. But despite the fact that our work at the office right now is 24/7 on COVID, climate change keeps creeping in. We've got folks that are living in our islands right now that abandoned the West Coast because of massive fires over the summer. We've got folks, including a neighbor of mine in Palolo, that went back to the Gulf Coast to help his family clean up in the wake of 2 hurricanes hitting Lake Charles, one right after the other a couple weeks later. So we know that just up until a couple days ago, we were in another period of drought here in the islands, and all of those are related to climate change, and all of them have a cost, and all of those are the impacts that we need to prepare for here through this plan. So getting mana'o from a group like this is critical. Just like COVID, climate change is all hands on deck effort. And I think your hands of the folks that are on this call are really especially important to make sure that you inform and guide our work, because we know that community resilience and island resilience is only as strong as the community connectivity that we have. And that's in part what we are trying to build, a network of folks that are engaged and can constructively contribute to how do we protect ourselves and our loved ones in the face of climate changes to come. So I just want to say mahalo to the team, Matt and Haley and Sophie and Ujay and Reina, everybody that put together this. I'm looking forward to learning from you guys along with everybody else. So mahalo, Matt, and thanks everybody.
Thanks, Josh. As we said, and I know there's a couple of folks that came in since we started, but we're just in the welcome and introduction phase or agenda item for today's meeting. And what we're just asking is very quickly for all of the advisory group members to give us your name, your organization, or sort of what group you're representing through this process, and just very quickly, a statement as to why you agreed to serve on this advisory meeting. So again, we're going to go reverse alphabetical. My wife's last name is Jung, so she always gets the short end of the alphabet. So out of respect for her, I'm going to start at the end of the alphabet, which in our case is the Y's. So Suzanne Young.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Young. I'm the CEO for the Honolulu Board of Realtors, and housing is an essential right. And we have houses here in Hawaii all along the shoreline. And so shoreline erosion is obviously something that we have to deal with. And so I come representing the needs of those who help buy, sell, rent, and own housing.
Great, thank you, Suzanne. Jessica Yamauchi.
Hi there, Jessica Yamauchi, Executive Director for the Hawaii Public Health Institute. Appreciate the opportunity to join this group. I think oftentimes people don't think about public health with climate change, and it's something that we have continued to try to illustrate as we know that there will be significant impact. So appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Apologies if I get pronunciation incorrect throughout the meeting, but Aiko or Aiko Yamashiro.
Yeah, thanks. It's Aiko. Aloha, you folks. Aiko Yamashiro. Proud Islander, families from Japan, Okinawa, and Guam, raised in Kaneohe, Oʻahu. And so as an Islander, really thinking about climate change and feeling it connected here, as well as our other islands. And I'm here as the Executive Director for Hawaii Council for the Humanities. So I'm really excited to participate and think about how our culture and languages, philosophies, and different diverse wisdoms can contribute and help to create these resilient communities. Thank you.
Hello, Aiko. Colby Takeda.
Hey everyone, Kobe Takeda from the Blue Zones Project, really under HMSA and here for the health and well-being aspects of community health. And certainly, like Jessica said, the implications on public health is really key that sometimes gets left out of climate change. So discussions, happy to be here, thank you.
Thanks, Colby. Hale Takazawa.
Oh, hi everyone, I'm Hale. I'm an architect and I sit on the board of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects of Honolulu, and with the Hawaii State Council. I'm also the head of the Design for Risk and Resiliency Committee. And our committee looks at our state's issues from infrastructure planning, lots of code issues we're trying to dig into. Anything to do with building, planning, and engineering as well. We have more than just architects on our particular committee, so it's a pretty good. We have a very good depth of people on there, including folks from the right from our city. So that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Hale. Jesse Suki.
Hi, my name is Jesse Suki. I sit on a committee with the American Planning Association, Hawaii Government Affairs, and so they asked me to sit on this for the American Planning Association Hawaii. So I hope to contribute from that planning perspective, but also my background is in land use and planning law. So I've been working in this area for quite some time, and actually was the director of the Office of Planning when we passed the Act, what is it, Act 186, the climate adaptation.
Priority guidelines.
Yeah, priority guidelines there. And I worked with many of you, so important issue that continue to work on.
I'm glad we can get you saying those words again, Jesse. You got to shake off the dust a little bit behind you, the sand there. Sue Shak.
Hi, it's Sue Shockey. I'm Assistant Director with Action for Community Equity. We are an interfaith nonprofit community organizing and advocacy group. We've been working on social justice issues, and recently we're working on environmental justice issues and just tying that with social justice. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Thanks for joining us. Pauline Sato. I don't think I see her. So moving on, Elizabeth Riley. You're on mute, Elizabeth. There
Got
you
it. Okay. Hi, Elizabeth Riley, founder and president of Livable Hawaii Kaihui. Protect and preserve cultural natural resources in the Manalua area, but the foundation of our organization has to do with the East Honolulu Sustainable Communities Plan. So land use is really important to us. We recently went through the review process, and a lot of climate change and resiliency topics came up, and we're really excited because that's going to be included in our plan. But I also recognize one of the reasons why this is important to me and our community is that I predict we're going to be going through redevelopment within the next 10 years. And I'd like us to be poised and have good sound principles and guidelines and so forth already in place. So looking forward to this. Thank you.
Appreciate that consideration, Elizabeth. Kieran Polk.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in really quick. Elizabeth, that background behind me is Moana Lope.
That's a good additional icebreaker recommendation for next time, Jesse. Thank you. Kieran? Can't hear you, Kieran.
Hi, my name is Kieran Polk. I'm the Executive Director for the Kapolei Chamber of Commerce. And we actually work, of course, on behalf of our members and the entire business community of Kapolei and West Oʻahu. We are growing, of course, into the second city. And because of that growth, I'm definitely happy to be here representing our side of the island and our businesses, and look forward to being a part of, as we're the voice of our businesses. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Kieran. Sharpo.
Aloha, my name is Charlotte Poi. I'm from Valley Pu'ea, which is Upper Waianae Valley. My family's been out in this side, the west side of Oʻahu, working on 7 generations now. Being a coastal community, I feel, it's very important for us to be in front of the ball when it comes to not only looking at how do we respond as a state, as a county, or as a community, but also looking at what plans are in place to respond and recover and try and find out what fits for our community beforehand and to mitigate and to be much better prepared for that. I also chair the Waianae Neighborhood Board and looking at the diverse issues that we face. I heard health come up, infrastructure, business. It's looking at what fits for our community that is pono and gives us good balance and positions us for, generational wealth and prosperity, and vai-vai, what we call vai-vai. And it's not just money, right? It is about our natural resources. Everything fits together to give this synergy and this life all around. So that's why I'm here and hope to contribute positively to this process. So mahalo, everyone.
Mahalo, Shar. Kavika Pigram.
Aloha mai kako. My name is Kavika Pegram. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called the Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition. We're a youth-led, climate justice-centered nonprofit. For example, I'm 19. Dyson, who's also here, is 18. I guess our role here is to kind of give the youth perspective and to make sure that decisions that we kind of make are have intergenerational balance with them. Kind of what Cher kind of already talked about, and yeah, just excited to be here.
Thanks, Kavika. Kathleen Pahinui.
Aloha. So nice to see so many familiar faces out there. Good to see everybody. I guess I'm here partly as chair of the North Shore Neighborhood Board. North Shore, as you know, is probably, along with Chair Poi's community, ground zero for climate change in a lot of areas. We have seawall issues, plus inland flooding, and a lot of things that are going on. And I also am the communications manager for the Board of Water Supply, which we also have great interest in all the climate change and infrastructure. Our infrastructures in most of the coastal highway. So we're passionate about this subject over here, as both Matt and Josh know. Mahalo.
Thanks, Kathleen. Mike Onofrietti.
Hi, I'm with Island Insurance Company. And I know it sounds odd given all the work that you folks do, but really our major concerns are not only are we a local company that's been here for 80 years now, and we care about the community because all of our employees live and work here. But one of the things we've always said is that when bad stuff happens, that's when insurance needs to be there. And the challenge is that if we have money ready to pay people to help rebuild their houses and businesses, if the infrastructures collapse, we can't do that. So we're very interested in making sure that we've got an infrastructure that can survive something bad that happens, so then we can help our customers and our businesses thrive in the future. So I'm anxious to try to help any way we can. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Mike. Dana Akano.
Aloha, everyone. Yes, I'm Dana Okano. I'm Program Director at Hawaii Community Foundation, where we provide funding and support for communities to encourage them to be more resilient. And on a personal note, I also just want to, ensure I'm helping and doing my part and taking the next extra steps for my children. So I'm leaving them something hopefully better than what I was given.
Thanks, Dana, for the personal and professional there. Hao Nguyen. Hao, I don't see you. And actually, for the group's knowledge, for those that we did receive a couple of regrets, and for those that are not here on the call, I'll go back and let you know that Pauline Sato is the executive and program director for Malama Learning Center. Hao is the, gotta find it on my list again, the interim executive director for the Pacific Gateway Center. But moving right along, Daniel Naho'opi'i.
Aloha mai, Daniel Naho'opi'i. Today I am wearing the hat of the Keone o Kakuhi Heba, which is the Oʻahu Council of Hawaiian Civic Clubs. There's 26 Hawaiian Civic Clubs on the island of Oʻahu. And of course, many of them you've worked with. They are community-based. Many of their priorities deal with various natural resources and climate change projects. And as Native Hawaiians, typically a lot of the areas we work in or lands that are, traditional lands are definitely impacted, either shoreline or based in the stream beds, et cetera, and the types of activities we're doing, as well as self-sustainability and other types of activities that are Native Hawaiian in nature. So also the implementation too, with all the 26 clubs, we can definitely mobilize and help support the community activation as well. Mahalo.
Thanks, Daniel. Good to see you again. Susan Mukai.
Hi, I'm Susan Mukai. I'm a senior engineer with Brown and Caldwell, which does environmental engineering. But I'm also involved heavily with the American Society of Civil Engineers and the American Waterworks Association. For work, I was involved with the Board of Water Supply climate change study that we recently did with the Water Research Foundation. We are also doing a lot of studies that are looking at climate change impacts to water and wastewater infrastructure, not just for Oʻahu, but also for the other islands. So I'm really excited to see what we can come up with here and how I can incorporate that back into our plans and what else I can learn from this group. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Susan. Lormona or Mona Meredith.
Aloha, hi guys. My name is Mona Meredith. I'm happy to be here and nice to meet everyone. I'm here representing the Polynesian Voyaging Society. I was a former coordinator for their Promise Pai'aina Partnership Initiative. Right now, we're just hoping to be a part of the conversation, to learn as much as we can and hopefully contribute and be part of the collective effort moving forward. So nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. Mikiala Lidstone. I don't see her today, but she is the executive director for, I don't have the titles here. We will make sure all of that information is available for you. And we'll talk about sort of the resource page that will be available on the project website. I only have people's email addresses, not their organizations. So my apologies. Dottie Kelly Paddock. Dottie is both a neighborhood board member for Kolauloa and the community resilience lead for the Hau'ula Community Association. Kimeone Kane. Kimeona Kane.
Aloha, aloha mai kako. Kimeona Kane. right here in the coastal community of Waimanalo. I serve as the chair for the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board. I'm the director of community outreach with a local environmental nonprofit called 808 Cleanups. I'm a practitioner of Oʻahu Mupohaku, so actively working on restoring fish ponds in our communities. And so, this topic is really important to us in so many different layers to make sure we continue to be a part of the game and certainly address things that need to be addressed. But I'm really happy to be here, happy to learn, happy to share. So mahalo.
Thank you. Brent Kakasako.
Hello, everyone. Brent. I call Manoa home, and I think we're experiencing some climate change with just the recent fires. So just want to bring that place in. I'm part of HACBED, Hawaii Alliance for Community-Based Economic Development. And then after 5, we have a different version of the acronym. So if we hang out longer, maybe. But also want to bring in our founders, cultural practitioners and activists who kind of always wanted to serve their communities. And in their words, people who are of this place and choose to be of this place. Mahalo.
Great, thank you, Brent. Jeannie Ishikawa.
Aloha, everyone. I am Jeannie Ishikawa. I'm the chair of the Wahiawa Whitmore Village Neighborhood Board number 26. And for me and for our community, it's important to be part of this dialogue because Wahiawa is undergoing some changes. It's an old town, but we look at sustainability and currently there are actions being taken to bring in more farming to the area to bring back agriculture. So there are things that are happening with that concept. We happen to be in the Pico, the center of the island, so we are also landlocked, if you will. So in the event of any type of devastation, we may not have an area to go to exit our town. So we look at travel, we look at sustainability, we look at agriculture diversity. So our town, as small as it is going through a lot of changes internally. So even at our neighborhood board, these topics come up. So we're happy to be part of this dialogue. Thank you. Mahalo.
Things are so different for their neighborhood board that they're hosting their meetings here at Kapala Mahale that I saw again last night when I was leaving work a little bit late. Yeah, thanks,
So
Jeannie.
Jeannie, your day job. Jeannie, your day job.
Sure,
Oh,
yeah, thanks, David.
I am the Deputy Director for the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder. Folks are here representing organizations in that participation here in the meeting, but obviously Jesse is not employed by the American Planning Association, but he's here participating as a representative of that membership organization. So folks will get more familiar with the dual roles that so many of us play professionally and out in the community. Moving right along, Josie Howard. I didn't see her today, but Josie is the executive director for the program director for We Are Oceania. Moving along, Leah Hong.
Oh, aloha, I'm Leah Hong. I am the state director of the Trust for Public Land, which is a national land conservation organization, a nonprofit. Our mission is to create parks and conserve land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. And I've agreed to be part of this hui because I'm just hoping to help in whatever way we can with our sort of land protection and parks expertise. Hi, Jeannie. I'm from Iowa also. And what's really funny is we're next door neighbors in Zoom, but we're actually, my parents are actually next door neighbors to their parents.
I know there's a lot of overlap.
Go Mules, go Mules.
That's right, go Mules.
Yeah, go Mules.
And Wahiawa is a Blue Zones community, and Wahiawa is a FACE community. So, and we also have our Hawaiian Civic Organization. So there's a lot of nice overlaps in this group.
Great, thanks for that, both Leah and Jeannie. Pono Higa.
Aloha, Matt. Aloha to everyone joining. My name is Pono Higa. I'm the chair of the Island Preparedness Group. It's the nonprofit result of merging the EVA Preparedness Committee, and the Waianae Coast Disaster Readiness Team. So the Island Preparedness Group focuses on leeward Oahu, and we do education, training, advocacy, all kind of focused on disaster preparedness. So thank you for the opportunity. I also wanted to add, I see familiar faces. I myself was part of the Oahu's resilience strategy, one of the working groups. So thank you for the opportunity to the office for allowing us to expand upon those actions.
Great, thank you, Pono. Alicia Higa sends her regrets. She is the Director of Health Promotion at Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Clinic. Hunter Hevelin.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Hunter Hevelin. I'm the chair of the Sierra Club Oahu Group's executive committee, and I work as a food system planner. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Hunter. Doug Harper.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Doug Harper. I'm the executive director of Moana Maunalua. Our role is restoring the health of Maunalua Bay, which includes everything from doing what takes place in the marine, but also what takes place on land. So this subject's really close to a lot of what we're doing. And so hopefully I can be a valuable member.
Great, thanks, Doug. Chip Fletcher.
Hey, everybody. I'm Chip Fletcher. I volunteer on the City and County of Honolulu Climate Change Commission. And my day job is professor and associate dean at University of Hawaii. I'm a climate scientist. My research focuses on sea level rise impacts and shoreline processes. It's great to see everybody.
Thank you, Chip. Stephanie Dunbar-Coe. I thought I saw her name.
Aloha nui, everyone. I'm Steph Dunbar-Coe, Climate and Protection Manager with the Nature Conservancy of Hawaii. I'm also from the Ahupua'a of Kainalu in Molokai. And we are here to help in any way we can in terms of contributing known science research and conservation solutions that we're developing or have developed. Additionally, this is a fairly new position for us, this climate manager position. And a big chunk of what I'll be doing in these next many months is creating a climate strategy for our chapter. And we're keenly interested in finding alignment and synergies with our developing strategy with this initiative here and with other climate initiatives statewide. So mahalo for having me.
Thank you, Steph. Dan Donnell.
Thank you, and I should add, Stephanie is the bravest person I've ever met because she moved to Oahu from Molokai in the middle of the pandemic. So welcome to Oahu, we're glad you're here. I'm with Trees for Honolulu's Future. We're a nonprofit that connects groups around urban trees and particularly the benefits trees bring in shade and runoff and myriad things, public health and so forth. Why I'm here, it's the only planet we got. Josh Stanbro spoke a couple years back to a group that I'm involved with, and he really painted a pretty dire picture. And really, we need to take action. And I'm, anxious to see how we can contribute, how this Hui will work together. And also beyond nonprofit, I've worked in the business sector, in the government sector as well. So hope that that will be beneficial to the group. Thank you.
Matt, you're muted.
Stuart Chong. Thanks, Haley.
Thanks, Matt. Stuart Chong, I'm the manager of reliability and resilience for Hawaiian Electric. And similar to Kathleen Pahinui for the border water supply, we have our infrastructure all over the island. So we clearly want to be a part of the dialogue here with this group and preparing our facilities for the impacts of climate change and building our own company's resilience. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. Dyson Chi.
Aloha everyone, my name is Dyson Chi. I'm also with the Hawaii Youth Climate Coalition, similar to Kavika. I serve as Advocacy Director for the organization, and I'm just really thankful to CCSR for bringing the youth perspective to this hui. I mean, a lot of times you see these community advisory huis being created, which will impact youth 100%, but don't have any youth on them. So I really appreciate CSR walking the talk and bringing youth on board. Super excited to be working with y'all.
Thanks, Dyson. Yvonne Chan sent her regrets for today's meeting, but Yvonne is the Director of Research at Iolani's Sullivan Center, but more importantly helps facilitate a 30 or so school network called Navai Ikolu within the Alawai watershed. Kathy Camp, are you on today, Kathy? Don't see. Kathy Camp has been invited to participate in her role as the board president for the local NIOP chapter with in Hawaii, in Honolulu. Simon Boussier.
Hey everybody, Simon Boussier. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Architecture at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. I call Manoa my home. The hat I'm wearing for the purposes of this meeting is representing the American Society of Landscape Architects Hawaii chapter. I currently have the honor of serving as their president. I'm here to learn from all of you, and I'm really eager to hear the super diverse perspectives around this humongous table. But I'm also here to hopefully impart some principles of ecological design toward this this strategy that we're working on together. So thanks for the invitation.
Great, thank you, Matt. I'm Matt. Thanks, Simon. Amy Brinker.
Aloha mai kako. I'm Amy Brinker, Sustainability Manager for Kamehameha Schools. I sit in a group of Kamehameha called the Community and Aina Resiliency Group, and I'm part of a department called the Natural Cultural Ecosystems, and I focus on a variety of sustainability systems, energy, water, food, waste, and Aina, specifically having a lot of focus lately around food systems. I'm a representative of the, not in this meeting, but I'm a member of the cohort of the statewide ag leadership program, and also involved in a accelerator program funded by Google for regional regenerative ag. And so I'm kind of interested in the intersections between various sustainability topics and how that impacts climate change. So thanks for having me. Super excited, enjoying seeing all these friendly faces and old friends.
Thanks, Amy. Adam Borello.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Adam Borello. I'm the Executive Director for the North Shore Community Land Trust. As Kathleen mentioned earlier, obviously we have our mission area is definitely has a diverse and many impacts from climate change. And so we appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this process, learn, and maybe share some of what we're going through. And then as a side note, we're happy and proud of our working together with the community on our Sunset Beach Dune Restoration project, which we've been working with the city and kicked off a couple years back with Josh and their office there. And you know, the happy news is that with thoughtful native outplanting and with some luck and a lot of hard work by the community and some monetary support from other partners, I think we've made a very real and positive impact on the dune at Sunset Beach for those of you who have been out there and seen it. So hopefully we can identify more opportunities like that in our mission area from Kaina Point to Kahuku Point, but also around the island.
Thanks, Adam. Rounding us off, David Arakawa. Muted, David.
Okay, Matt, thank you for starting at the end of the alphabet. Dave Arakawa, Executive Director of the Land Use Research Foundation of Hawaii. We represent Hawaii's major landowners and companies, all impacted by climate change, most involved in renewable energy and resiliency. In addition to landowners, we represent the two largest energy companies, Hawaiian Electric and Hawaii Gas. I don't know if I talk about the housing developers, etc. The largest shopping centers on Oahu and the tourism industry. I'm also a member of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, Governor's Housing Working Group, and involved with the State Transit-Oriented Development Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Great, thank you, David. And I've gotten a couple of notes from folks about additional participants in today's meeting. And just a reminder for everybody, and we'll talk about this now moving forward, that this is a meeting of the advisory hui. These meetings are open to the public, and folks are absolutely more than welcome to participate and tune in. And at this point, I would actually just ask if you are a participant who is not one of the invited and confirmed advisory hui members, but you would definitely like to ensure that you receive information about upcoming meetings, I ask that you please private chat to Ujay Siddharth. You can find his name in the chat function so that we can add you to the distribution list. There will be opportunities for public comment throughout the meeting, but to ensure that we progress on today's agenda, I'm going to keep us moving along. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for that long introduction. I know it's a lot, but it's really important at this first meeting to, connect as best that we can in these times and in this format. As once I started sharing screen, all your faces went from here over to there. So I'm just like talking to myself at my computer, but really appreciate everyone's patience as we navigate some really important discussions and some content in this format. So moving us right along, the next couple of items 2 and 3, you were provided some additional prep material in the participant packet. So I hope we're able to get through this relatively quickly so that we can get into the items for discussion today. And again, please don't hesitate to keep sending questions in the chat and we'll address those throughout the meeting. So very quickly, as was discussed by Josh and in the participant packet, the purpose of this meeting obviously is just to orient folks to the project, our operating requirements, and to engage in some questionnaires that the community themselves are also working through in this early phase of the project. At the end of all of this, no need to do it today, but certainly after we talk more about the commitments and the expectations, as well as the requirements of Sunshine Law, if for any reason you feel you're unable to, or you would rather not proceed in serving on this advisory hui, feel free to just let me know via email. I may ask that you help us identify potentially filling a geographic or a thematic gap, but certainly understand if it all just feels like it's a bit too much. The main purpose obviously is to advise and provide input on issues and priorities in the development of this adaptation strategy, and ultimately, hopefully helping us provide some really strong recommendations for decision-making alignment. This will make a little bit more sense when we talk about the latter stages of the project, but a very interesting time right now as we transition into the new year with a new administration and a new set of council members, 5 of the 9 council members. So we hope to continue the good momentum of the work to date and facilitate informed decision-making consistent with the recommendations from this project and from this hui. Obviously, through the introductions, you were made aware of how diverse this group is. We perhaps went for broke on the invitations and were pleasantly surprised at the number of positive responses. The introductions obviously took some time, but that's a good recognition that even though we cast a wide net, we also recognize that there's a lot of voices and representation that are germane to this conversation. And sometimes we would try to double dip. Susan is an example where she's a member of 3 different engineering associations. So we tried to find those opportunities as well. But I also want you to know that we were looking for representation across a variety of things. Obviously, these 3 categories of, whether it's business and industry, community and education, or culture and the environment. But we were also looking at other things like, for example, the North Shore Sustainable Communities Plan is about to kick off. So how do we make sure we bring and align and support that process? We also looked at some of our social vulnerability and other economic and equity factors to make sure that we had representation of organizations from places that, even though they may have a lower population, certainly have some of the challenges or the most immediate challenges of climate impacts that we're discussing today. So again, thank you all for your agreements and commitments to serve on this advisory hui. And then, just to reiterate, the recommendations and support are towards our office in execution of this project in thinking through the various project phases, which we'll talk about in the later agenda items. A reminder that the meetings are open to the public with time reserved for each meeting for community feedback and input. Per Sunshine, the agendas are posted 6 calendar days in advance of the meeting. This meeting in particular was posted through the city clerk, through the city's events calendar, but I also want you to know that there's a new spot on the project page where all of the agenda, the meetings, and the recordings will be available moving forward. And that gets us into that next point. And then, finally here, these meetings are in addition to the other public and virtual community engagements that we're kicking off this week. We have 3 this week starting tomorrow. Obviously, the other processes on the specific tasks within the project with the city departments, and in addition to our engagement with state agencies. Lastly, we just wanted to reaffirm that this is a 2-way commitment as presented in the invitation letter. We're working towards really just sticking to these 5 meetings. First one today, November the 9th, which we'll talk about, and then TBD into January, April, and June. We really will strive to keep it at the time, to be respectful of your efforts and your support through this process. But additionally, we wanted to make the offer back to you that, myself as project manager, Josh to the best of his ability, but also the team, we will be available for any additional discussions that you would like to have in between meetings, either one-on-one or direct engagements with your organizations, etc. We hope that this is informative, mutually beneficial, and a path for climate change adaptation for this island. And we ask that you help us in spreading the word and encourage participation throughout the project and beyond through your networks. Any questions from the members on agenda item 2 at this point? There was a question from Aiko regarding, will there be a list of advisory members? And we would like to put a roster identifying your name and your organization and your position title consistent with what we have on record. And again, if someone is uncomfortable with that or uncomfortable with proceeding and having that information posted online, please let me know, and we can either talk about it or perhaps identify some. Okay, hearing none, let's just keep rolling along so we can get to the actual content. Obviously, as I mentioned, and a lot of you are probably much more familiar with the processes required by Sunshine Law, but in the same way that we at the Resilience Office help facilitate the city's Climate Change Commission and a process that we went through for a specific bill that was passed and establishment of rules where we had established the Disposable Foodware Advisory Group, we intended to do this generally, but it's important to remind ourselves of all the requirements. What I would like to just leave here with you all is that there are resources, both training videos and a PDF guide for your education. And it's required that all members go through the Sunshine Law training. And we ask that prior to the November meeting, that you confirm with me that you have completed the training, and that training itself, this link here, they are 2 videos, each 1 hour in length. Obviously you can break it up, but it's important that you get exposed to it. Not all of the information in there are the roles and responsibilities that you are going to undertake, but it's important that you understand the transparent process. Any questions on the Sunshine Law requirements at this stage? I'll try to answer as best that I can, but I want to keep us moving if possible. Hearing none, seeing none, I'm going to move on to questions that we have received to date. I did receive some questions from Brent, but Brent, with your permission, I'd like to hold off on answering those here because they actually will be addressed in item number 5, if that's okay. Thumbs up from Brent. But I did also receive a question from Alicia Higa, and this is maybe something that we can all address right now as it relates to item number 9. We recognize, the balance between this being extra hours for people and somehow potentially cutting into their day hours, but it's also cutting into the night hours. We had, on balance, tried to schedule this between 4 and 6 p.m., but we're very much open to a shift in the schedule if people want to make sure they're done at an earlier time. So the potential offering here is to either start at 3, start at 3:30, or start at 4 for the meetings moving forward. And I would just ask if you have opinions on that to write them into the chat, and then we can collect all of those and confirm on agenda item number 9, setting the time for that November the 9th meeting. So if you could send those directly to, if you don't feel strongly one way or the other, no need to respond, but if 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. sounds best, or 3:30 to 5:30 sounds best, please let us know so we can work best with your all's schedule. I don't see any other specific questions. We got a chat from Shar. Do neighborhood board members who already have completed Sunshine Law training still need to redo complete? My guess is no, but let us confirm and get back to you. Or if Win or someone else who's on, Win, thank you, she says no. So if you have already completed this as a result of your neighborhood board participation, you're all set. Or any other Sunshine requirements. Whew, okay, right into it. So obviously we're here to give some orientation to the project. And we want to get right into it. We're going to give a little bit more background of obviously what led up to this work, but then really get us into what the details of this project are. And even though I keep using this term that it's a new project, it's not really new work, because it's really just a continuation and an advancement of a lot of things that agencies, community members, our office, et cetera, are working on and providing a lot of dedicated focus and resources towards that effort. So Josh alluded to this, but obviously, this is squarely within the kinds of things that the voters expected from an office such as this. So we're really appreciative of having all the participation from you all to engage in the subject. Not to belabor or dwell on this too much, but obviously we know that one of the reasons we need to have conversations like this is because globally, a lot of the things and practices that perhaps provided us some benefit at different stages in our history are now causing some issues that we're having to deal with. And even locally, we know that at great expense, we export a fair amount of money to import the thing that then is causing us and requiring us to adapt to change. And some of the foundational science is recorded right here in the state, tracking carbon CO2 particles in the atmosphere, concentrations in the atmosphere. And you can learn more about the steps along our emissions measurements through our energy program at resilientoahu.org/energy. And in the letter, it even mentioned that climate action is a thing that is happening, but is distinct from this effort, which is really all about acknowledging and preparing ourselves to address the impacts that are coming to our shores. So we also know that climate change mitigation and adaptation didn't necessarily start at 2017, but I use this as a benchmark because at that point in time, the executives across the state and the counties reaffirmed our local commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. It's also when this office started ramping up activities after the voters elected to create the office. And what I just wanted to highlight here is, all of these things are starting to chip away and continue the iterative processes to make sure that we're as active as possible on getting our emissions down to zero, but really also honing in on the things that we need to address, whether it's the resources on climate change and sea level rise, or looking specifically at community heat and community forestry, or now even the counties having to make some local amendments as there's activity and actions at the state level around the Coastal Zone Management Program. And sorry, I heard, I'll just keep going. What I am offering here is a reminder for some of you, but in case you aren't aware, the way that the city and county has structured its planning frameworks and decision-making frameworks is through the State Planning Act, which requires the county to have a general plan, as well as these community and regional plans. And a couple of the participants spoke about that today. In essence, what we are doing through this project is recognizing that these plans go through their own iterative update process. Sometimes this can be a long time in between. Obviously, there's new information that can come to light before any update process. So resources coming out of this plan will be provided and support the update process as those plans come around, but also to really support the departments in their functional planning. There's a heavy emphasis in this work around city infrastructure and assets, as well as the communities that could be impacted by the effects to the ability to provide services in different areas around the island. So you all likely know that we're very fortunate to have 5 steadfast volunteers, experts in the fields of climate sciences and the built environment, providing us really critical information to then now carry forward into this work. And from their recommendations, the mayor in the summer of 2018 issued a directive that required the departments to integrate and utilize all this information from the Climate Change Commission in a whole multitude of our work. Some of this includes at the planning level. So this is an example from the primary urban center development plan update process, which is nearing completion, to look at, they made it, they wanted to make sure that sea level rise was integral to their considerations. So they actually issued one of their technical papers on that subject. We've heard about the Board of Water Supply, obviously thinking about the long-term security of the resource itself as rainfall patterns change, but also thinking about the transmission and getting the water through the pipes to the communities. They've taken the lead on looking at some of the risks and vulnerabilities to their system and some of the shared utility corridors, examples here showing bridge crossings on DOT roads, state DOT roads. Another example of integrating this information is our environmental services department, looking at the wastewater planning out in the Waianae facilities district. How do we think about the various stages and levels of sea level rise, and how does that potentially negatively affect their pipes, pumps, and plants, which have different thresholds for permitting, for taking on inundation. And then getting all the way down, obviously, to how do we actually do the permitting on any specific project. This was one of the resilience actions from the resilience strategy to revisit our shoreline practices, whether it's the shoreline setback or the special management area. And as I mentioned, the state just passed a law that additionally requires the counties to change or at least practice differently how we have been. And we also all know on this call that just changing the shoreline setback doesn't actually alleviate the condition that's presented here on this image, where we also need to find ways to incentivize or provide outs for some of these residents, or ensure that we are not doing the things then that cut off our access to public trust resources, or that, as one study alluded to, potentially eliminating sandy beaches on this island by mid-century. Which brings us quickly to this project, which again was one of the resilience strategy actions. And this is to address Brent's questions. He had a specific question on, like, what does all this mean? We had some very nice, lofty language in the invitation letter, but again, this project is oversimplified in two parts: risk assessment and the strategies to address those risks. And we have a heavy focus on city infrastructure and being able to provide services for community members island-wide, and better understanding those risks to inform whether it's land use planning or infrastructure operations and management. We know that we want to support the community plans, but we also know that we have another plan that looks at hazards. And we don't necessarily want to just create more and more plans, but in the interim, towards the next hazard mitigation plan, we're going to continue on this climate adaptation strategy, and then very much so integrate this information better into the hazard mitigation plan, because that's actually a plan that we are required to produce to be eligible for certain FEMA federal disaster funds. So that's really our hook to ensure continued future climate resilience and hazard mitigation. So here's the project timeline and where we're at right now. The items on the agenda will continue the discussion around risk assessments, as well as starting to have the conversation around some of the guiding principles. And lastly, this is again just reiterating what I just said around the hazard mitigation plan, where we want that to really be the mechanism by which we're making the kinds of infrastructure alignment and other risk-informed decisions moving forward. We have a lot of resources available at the project website. We've tried to digitize and make as much of it accessible in that format. Here's an example of turning the climate change brief into a climate impacts and climate change graphic, where you can click on these and learn a little bit more about any of those specific items. We also have a Climate Ready Oʻahu web explorer that takes some of the state's data, as well as the federal government's data around sea level rise, as well as some of the locally generated data around heat and our existing FEMA flood insurance rate maps. And this is what I mentioned. We had community volunteers drive around on what just happened to be the hottest day of the year last year, which was also tied for the hottest day ever recorded in Honolulu. And we now have a really important and strong sense around the public health impacts and consequences of high heat. And I'll just add as an anecdote from our survey, a lot of the comments that have been coming in so far from the nearly 100 people that have participated have really honed in and focused on the effects of heat that they've been grappling with already. And then we want to make sure that we're elevating all of the information that we know around some of the historical disparities and some of the decision-making impacts that have put certain peoples in more vulnerable situations than others. And we want to make sure that we're carrying that information for decision-making along with some of these other budget decisions into the future, to have either screens or processes for really highlighting and demonstrating to community sort of the transparency in decision-making. And we certainly look forward to this group's recommendations moving forward. To kind of wrap it up, we know that a lot of the things that we're reacting to today are just that. We're in reaction mode to decisions or indecisions that have been made for the last, industrial times, but really for the last 60 to 70 years around climate change emissions. And we want to make sure that we're being as clear-eyed as possible with community and our government partners, that even though there's a lot of opportunities that persist and exist in our plans, and that tends to establish expectations about what can and should be done, We also know that some of those decisions might then force upon us obligations for future risk. So this is an important moment in time to, take a pause and relook at some of our practices, as you all have shared from your intros as well. Because climate costs, and it's costing us today, and it's costing us into the future, whether it's some of our public assets, the private residences and the public trust resources, but also businesses or opportunities for redevelopment. These are real challenges that people are affected by today. And this is only looking at the sea level rise and coastal erosion hazard. The state has provided us a lot of information around properties and structures that are potentially at risk from only sea level rise, but it didn't quite have the information on what does that mean for our public infrastructure. The state has produced a report looking at some of the most vulnerable or most already most affected areas of the coastal highways. And we're already in discussions with DOT highways in particular on how to do more of this investigation together, because they'll say something along the lines of, we provide transportation as a service. So if there's discussions on what to do with the roadway, it really has to come from the county and come from the community in terms of telling them what the future land use and future vision for community is. And here are just a couple of final examples around some of the challenges that affect our city agencies today. Here's erosion out at the Sand Island wastewater treatment plant outfall. The Board of Water Supply is challenged on addressing water mains. When there's high tides, they have to wait for the tide to go down, which then allows, unfortunately, more of that precious resource to be lost. Here's some impacts from the 2018 flooding in East Honolulu that tore through one of our drainage channels, while also having significant impacts on the private property in particular. And here's an example of just another coastal beach park that's been affected here in Punaluu. Lastly, while we know it's not the answer, it's one of the steps that we're currently taking and pursuing. Maui County actually just this week was added to the list of communities that have filed suit against the fossil fuel industries, because community itself, either through redevelopment or through government actions, shouldn't have to bear the cost alone to adapt to some of these impacts that were hidden and disguised through campaigns of misinformation over time. Wrapping up here, just wanted to highlight some of the other inputs that are in the project. The City Climate Change Commission has a whole suite of guidance documents that they've already produced. We talked quite a bit about the climate change brief. They additionally have a sea level rise guidance document. At the request of Mayor, they provided some recommendations and thoughts for when we are able to re-engage around the shoreline setback discussion. And then lastly, and most recently, looking at the financial risk of climate change and guidance, because again, we're already being asked from bond agencies and rating agencies about what we are doing to address our known risks. And we do a very good job of identifying the risks, but if we don't demonstrate the forward movement, there's potential concerns and challenges on our ability to borrow to invest in communities to address these risks. So we thank you all for your participation as we think about this, whether it's in Honolulu or all the way out in Punaluu. We need to support community and really think about how we manage environmental and community change towards mid-century. So with that, I know that was a big context and background. I wanted to leave this image up, which again is the project timeline, before we go into our next activity, which is really discussing the impacts with you all.
So because we are such a big hui, we're splitting up into 4 breakout groups. In just a moment, you'll get the little pop-up inviting you to join one of the groups where hopefully, you'll have more space to have a more substantive conversation, discussion about all of this.
Yeah, so thank you, Sophie. Sophie is our tech manager for today, a very important job. She will be facilitating us to go into some of the other discussion items. But before we move on to the next agenda item, wanted to open it up to the members of the WHOI in case you had any really specific or pressing questions or misunderstandings at this stage in the project, or in the agenda, I should say. And I know it's a lot. Again, this is being recorded. The presentation and all the information will be available at the project website, and then there is the project website itself. But I do want to acknowledge, I see that advisory member Pauline Sato is able to join us, so thank you, Pauline. And apologies if I missed anybody else if they've entered since. So hearing no pressing questions, what's exciting for me is that I get to stop talking as we now move into the actual discussion items on the agenda. And I know some of you have already let me know that you're not available at full time today. So, you know, when you have to go, that's understood. Again, all this information will be available to you. And we are collecting some of that information on the timing preferences for the next meeting. So seeing no specific questions, this next item is discussion on climate hazard impacts. So as Sophie mentioned, we're actually going to be assigned and split up into small working sessions for items 6 and 7. We'll come back in between for some additional questions and updates, and then just continue on along. So any questions before we are virtually forced into these other rooms?
Matthew?
David, yes,
Hi,
thank you.
I was wondering, do we have any materials, written materials on the climate hazard impacts? Is there a list of the things that we'll be discussing? I know they were on the slide presentation, but we don't have a copy of the slide presentation. And also on the climate change adaptation guiding principles. I don't think that was in the handout. I mean, the materials you sent us. I may have missed it, but
no, you're correct, David. So the discussion actually will be a facilitated discussion where these are actually working sessions. So what we're about to do right now is actually go through a questionnaire, and each of you will complete this questionnaire and then have an opportunity to discuss it quickly in your groups. And then actually the discussion on the climate change adaptation guiding principles, we have some prompts for you to start to offer us some of your thoughts and comments.
Okay, and after these sessions, would we be able to get hard copies, or would it be online, so that if we go home tonight and we have other thoughts, or we talk to our members or clients and we can follow up with more information, would that be acceptable?
Yes, absolutely. And we'll use this one as an example. So what we will be doing in the next breakout is looking at this Climate Ready Oahu intro survey. And we're actually asking you to participate, not in, you know, David Arakawa, resident of, et cetera, but in your role as the ED of LIRF. And then we also welcome you sharing that link out. It is an online form, and, you know, members or whomever can participate. But I would also encourage you as a resident then, sometimes our professional roles and our personal minds aren't necessarily one and the same. So there's nothing stopping you from providing both perspectives. But all of this material, as we've said a couple of times, will be available at the project website. And these are, at least in these first couple of meetings with you all, the meetings that we're having with the advisory group are fairly similar to the first 2 rounds of community meetings. So they'll be going through some similar facilitated processes.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yep. Any other questions? If not, we're mostly on time. So I'm going to ask Sophie to just make us head into the ether. And you as advisory members, as well as members of the public who are joining the meeting, members of the public, certainly please participate in the facilitated online stuff. That will make more sense once you get to the room. But again, the open discussion, reserve that right now for the members. but don't hesitate to enter anything into the chat, and we'll try to address it when we come back or when we get to the item for public input. Am I forgetting anything else? All of the breakouts will also be recorded, and all of the recordings, again, will be available. So we know, if this were a room, we could obviously break out and members of the public could observe that. It's a little bit harder in the virtual space, so we want to make sure that we're documenting that and making it as available as possible. Did I miss anything, Sophie?
No.
Oh, what I meant to say is the team members will facilitate these breakout groups. So you will be assigned either myself, Haley, Susan, or, oh, everyone's disappearing. Did Sophie send people already?
I'm so sorry. I thought that was the cue. We
It's
were
all
ready to
good,
go.
no worries. Laters, everybody. Facilitators, don't forget to record.
There should be a pop-up that you click to join the room. If you're not seeing it,
Haven't seen it.
you may want to stop screen sharing. That might help.
Okay.
Or maybe just looking around your screen, looking behind this current window.
Some people are slowly disappearing, or they're leaving the meeting in total.
Is there any way you could resend the invite? I don't seem to be getting it.
Yeah, neither do I.
Strange. I'm not sure how to do it since it looks like a number of people are already in the rooms. Apologize for the tech issues.
We'll get there. They might be a little confused because all the facilitators are still here. This is the good stuff that people want to watch the recordings for.
It looks like one option I could do, I could close all the rooms and reopen them and see if that works, but we might still have the same issue.
It might be worth a try if we're not able to get us over there right now.
Okay. Unfortunately, they're closing in 60 seconds. So you can talk for another 60 seconds.
But only about this agenda item.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a way to just use this as one of the breakout rooms, you guys, if you can get your.
No, it didn't work because all of the, yeah, no, appreciate that, Josh.
Okay, well, hopefully the second time I'll change the setting and hopefully it'll work.
You guys are doing a great job, by the way.
Thanks, Simon.
Doing a great job. This is a
Wouldn't
lot.
be a
Can you
wouldn't be
see
a proper
anything?
virtual meeting without errors.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're using your phone. For folks that are on the phone, like, is any of this material actually visible?
Yeah. I've got a whole weird setup here with a bunch of screens going, and no, you guys are doing great. I'm just a very sympathetic audience when it comes to tech problems.
Yeah, since you've been teaching remotely since March.
Yeah. Some of that, plus the other stuff.
Our group didn't have a person facilitating.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So actually everyone's going to be coming back and we're going to try to reassign and get people over there. There was a tech issue.
For some reason, the pop-up didn't come up for everyone, but this time, fingers crossed, it should send you over there automatically.
And I know there are some folks that need to leave early. So this survey is also at the project website.
Sorry for the background noise. I think that this might be one of the breakout rooms. Right?
I hope not.
No, it's not.
I think it's the
That's-
same people.
Seems like the same thing happened.
Let's do it as a plenary. Let's just bring everyone back so we can keep going.
Okay.
How many breakout rooms were there supposed to be, Matthew?
Four,
Four.
David. Yeah.
Okay.
So roughly
4
10
divided
per
by
room.
30. Okay.
These are the
Good.
fastest breakouts I've ever had.
Did you get all the questions right, Amy?
Yes, our group, 100%.
Okay. Do we have everyone back? No, folks are still coming back. Just for everyone that's coming back in, we're just going to do it as the full group. Just wait for everyone to trickle back in.
Yeah, we've just got about just a few more seconds and everyone.
I think we're about to bounce back.
While we're waiting, Kavika, are you a Waipahu High School grad?
Yes, sir.
Sophie, do we think that's everybody? Everyone's back. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody. If you remember, if you were here so early, one of the items that we had at the beginning is thank you for your patience. Sometimes things go wrong with tech, but what's most important is just to keep progressing with the meeting. So instead of doing the breakouts, we're going to do it all here as a big group, and we'll just keep rolling through. So to stop hearing my voice, I'm going to ask one of our facilitators. I'm going to ask Haley if you could facilitate agenda item number 6, please.
Sure. Switching voices. Hi, everyone. As Matt previously introduced me, I am Haley Cook. I am the Policy and Research Specialist with the Resilience Office. Happy to be here. And to facilitate the conversation, we're going to use Menti. So I don't know if you've used Menti before, but I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. And let me know if you can see this on the screen there.
Yep.
Okay. So there are some instructions at the top. We're going to need you to go to menti.com. You can do that on a new web browser page, or you can do it on your mobile phone, menti.com, and there's a code there to log into this discussion. And it is hard to see you all on my screen, so I'll give you a few minutes and maybe Matt can help if you can see more faces when it seems like we've got thumbs up from folks or thumbs down if you aren't able to get in there. Please let us know.
While we're waiting, I want to also acknowledge that Josie Howard, one of the additional advisory HUI members, was able to join us today.
Thank you, Matt.
Folks feel ready and prepared with the see some nodding, generally thumbs up. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, here we go. So let's see if I can get the screen to move. There we go. To start us off, Matt had referenced this map in his presentation, and just want to get us again familiar with sense of place. This is obviously the way that the city has broken up the island in terms of these regional development plans. And so keeping this map in mind, we want to ask you this question. Where do you feel most connected to place? You can pick more than one answer here, but thinking about the places that you live, places that you work, places your family live in, places you recreate, where do you feel most connected to?
And as those are coming in, to avoid the virtual tomatoes that maybe Kathleen had thrown at me because Haley used the word development plan when she described them, these are the 8 community regional plans, some of which are identified as development plans, only 2, and the other 6 are identified as sustainable community plans.
Dude, how did you read my mind? I was not
Thank you,
even
Matt.
going to say anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we've got quite a few answers here. We'll give a little bit more time if there are others coming in. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. If at any point you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. But the next question we have for you is around climate hazards. And the first question is, do you think climate hazards, some of which Matt referenced in his presentation earlier, affect your life or your community area today? And then thinking forwards, do you think that these climate hazards will affect your life or community area by the year 2050?
And again, as the advisory WHOI members, we're asking that, at least in the participation in this survey today, think about your role and the entities and the networks and the folks that you're at least representing here today. And then feel free to take it as yourself as an individual, even if you disagree with some of your members and networks, et cetera.
All right, I still see answers coming in, so I'll give it a little more time. It's interesting, I didn't know when we practiced this, they'd give an average between the two. Super cool to see. Okay, moving on to our next question for you. Has your household been impacted by any of the following? So we have a few different hazards there at the bottom. Feel free to choose as many as are relevant to you. How has your household been impacted by any of the following? Answers coming in quick on this one. Awesome. It seems like 32 is our critical mass here. It seems to be the number we get to most. So thank you for sharing those. I'm going to move on to the next. Maybe. Let's see. So this is a bit of an open-ended question here. You can feel free to write your response wherever you're submitting your answers here. But thinking about those hazards that you've indicated you are impacted by, the next question is how? How are you impacted by these events? What does that mean for you? And if you'd like to share verbally, I think that'd be welcome as well. I can't see any faces, so Matt, if you could help, if somebody looks like they want to share. Yeah, these are great. Thank you. See, I'm still rolling in. I know this one's tough to type it all out, so I'll give you a few more moments here. And Matt, a question for you: will the results of these responses also be available with the rest of the materials? It'd be great to read them all back because there's a lot of good stuff in here.
Yep, we can provide this as a distinct survey activity in the notes as well.
Awesome. Okay, so we will have time to go over these on our own. So I'm going to move on to the next one. So the next one's a bit of the next few questions are a bit of a set. So in thinking about some of these hazards, we're going to ask you the same questions for each. So this first one is around tropical storms and hurricanes. How do you think tropical storms and hurricanes will impact the following? So we have your personal physical health and safety, your personal mental health, the cohesion of your community, and your personal livelihood and employment.
To David's question earlier about, the read ahead materials, or there wasn't information available on discussion of climate hazard impacts, what you're actually observing here in the survey was some of the pre-screening that was done by departments and our office with our consultants for the project, where in looking at the sort of baker's dozen or so of the main categories within the city's climate change brief, we had posed the question to them to help us understand, with respect to their departments, their assets, and the services that they provide, which of these 13, which top 5 are they most concerned about and want us to carry forward in the risk assessment. So this is the first of the 5 that came out of that process.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So this was one, tropical storms and hurricanes. We're going to move on to the next one, which is hotter temperatures. How do you think hotter temperatures will impact you in the following ways? Big jump there.
Must have immediately have been Colby or Jessica out of the gate, getting their responses in first.
Yeah, you were all quick on that one. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. The next one is flooded or eroding beaches and coastal infrastructure. How do you think flooded and or eroding beaches and coastal infrastructure will impact you? As awesome as all the technology is, it's still moments like this where I wish we were all together so we could all have a communal reaction to what we're seeing on the screen.
It's definitely workable, but it's not the same.
Yeah. But appreciate you all going through it with us. Close to our number there. Any other results coming in? Awesome. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next question, which is extremely heavy rainfalls and landslides. How do you think extremely heavy rainfalls and landslides will impact the following? All right, waiting on maybe one or two more. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Our next question is, how do you think droughts on the leeward side will impact the following? From heavy rain to droughts. All right, thank you for your responses. And we're going to keep moving on. Yes or no question, do you think different types of communities are affected differently by climate change? This was a quick one. Maybe a couple
Somebody
more
should vote
responses.
no just to be an outlier here.
Just to make a more colorful donut.
I think it's just understanding that even with our diversity, we're kind of agreed that a cookie cutter approach to this doesn't work for everybody. So
Yeah, thanks for that additional context, Shar. And that's actually a great segue to the next question if you want to keep us moving.
Mm-hmm. What, if any, concerns do you have that climate change impacts will affect individual communities unequally? So again, an open-ended question here. If there's something you'd like to verbally share out, please feel welcome to do so. Typing can get lengthy.
And we're just so you all know, just to give you, to telegraph where we're going, we're nearly done with the survey. So thanks for continuing to participate in this process. We'll give this one another solid 30 seconds.
Yeah, we've got a good number of responses here. Thank you all. So moving on from this, we have a few demographic questions that we'd like to ask you, and they should pop up on your screen there in front of you. They won't come up on our screen here, but we do ask that you submit those so we can have a better understanding of the kinds of community outreach that we're doing and link those up with the kinds of responses that we're getting from folks in terms of how they feel these different hazards are going to impact them. So we'll take a few moments to do that.
Yeah, so as Haley goes through those, also want to let everyone know that though all these questions are required responses, all of them offer the response of prefer not to respond if you're inclined. And just to give you all a better sense of why we ask these, this probably becomes a little bit more important when we're out doing the community engagement, although it's still very relevant for representation through the advisory HUI. Learning from the responses that we get actually helps us better understand some of the gaps in our outreach and then how we need to refocus our communications or ask for support from community-based organizations on how we can better connect with people all across this island. So thank you.
So quick question, there's the last checkbox on the slide, it looks like it's a combination of two questions. because it says prefer not to answer, and then it says including yourself. How many people live in your household?
Let me look at that.
And can I make a recommendation, I guess, before you guys go out and do this some more? How do you identify? And it lists ethnicities, but there's no mixed. And I think especially being in Hawaii, we have to have a mixed option.
There is, you are permitted to select more than one, but maybe, do you recommend then, Dana, that we make it explicit? Especially if it's not visible.
Yeah, it wasn't obvious to me actually that I could choose more than one. So maybe just making it more explicit that choose as many as applicable or something.
Sure. Yeah, I see that now looking at it. And Shar, what was your question? I apologize.
So on my
so
screen,
the what is your age is a drop down. And then the next question is how to identify.
well, so I have 3 questions here, right? The drop down for the age, how do you identify, how long have you been a resident? And then the last check mark, just because I read all the boxes anyway.
It should just say prefer not to respond. You're right.
Okay.
That actually, including yourself, is the next question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We'll update that. Thank you.
All right, there's one more set of demographic questions that we want to ask you. So we're going to move on to that last piece.
Although we need to also include a prefer not to respond to this question. Thanks everybody for the important feedback before our 2 p.m. meeting tomorrow. So, you know, as the responses are coming in, just to let you all know, we have 3 round 1 community meetings this week. All of them will be presenting and offering the same content and information. We wanted to provide different times and different days depending on people's availability. So that's 2 p.m. tomorrow, 6 p.m. Thursday, and 10:30 a.m. on Saturday.
Thanks, Matt. And
as this is the last, thank you to Haley for facilitating us through this. As this is the last question for this agenda item, I wanted to bring it back and ask the advisory group members if you have any questions or additional comments for this agenda item. I want to make sure we can just also keep going.
Matthew, so what?
Yes, David.
What agenda item was this?
This was what we just did was number 6, discussion of climate hazard impacts. And the reason we wanted to go through this is to additionally spark any discussion or questions around climate hazard impacts, perhaps why those were the 5 that were identified. But you know, we also appreciate all the members here as knowledgeable folks out in the community that have a good sense of some of the things that their networks or groups are concerned about. So we appreciate going through those questions. Go ahead, David.
The minutes could reflect it more as a questionnaire with some discussion items, right? Because the minutes make it look like an actual discussion, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe it was supposed to be with the breakout groups. So that's okay.
It was intended to be a little bit more and then to have time to come back together, but that's I hear that and a good recommendation as we continue to craft agenda to make sure that it's clear what people are engaging in, and so that community and the public understand what's on the agenda. So thank you for that, David. And actually, even though the next one, and we're going to stay in the plenary and just keep moving, is still a little bit in the interactive format, it very much is open-ended discussion on the guiding principles. So unless there are any additional comments or questions on this agenda item, I'm going to move us along and continue to have Haley navigate through the same Menti portal the discussion on climate change adaptation guiding principles. So what we're actually really hoping to elicit from you all is even though we're at this stage of the project, we also want to keep our eye towards what we're finally trying to produce and recommend in terms of actions to take, and how do we align a whole variety of things that facilitate how we make decisions. So there will be a couple of prompts in Menti, and in essence, we're hoping to elicit from you just some very early stage thoughts on, like, what is adaptation? What can it be? What should it be? How should we think about trade-offs and balances? And this activity will be carried forward from meeting to meeting and iterated on towards some final recommendations at later stages. So I'm going to give it back to Haley for now.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm gonna share my screen again here. And like Matt said, we're still gonna use Menti, and I hope you can all see that. So the code should all be the same. These things should be popping up on wherever you are submitting your responses before. And while we're still gonna use Menti for responses, we encourage you, if you have additional reflections, things you want to bring up, feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to vocalize them. This part can be a bit more of a discussion than the survey questions. So with that, we're going to go in here. And the first thing we want to show you, I'm not sure how well you can see this on your screen, but this chart just simply shows the number of mentions within the respective 8 community plans of the 5 climate hazards that are being assessed. So the different colors there are the different climate hazards, which you can see at the bottom of the chart, and how many times they're mentioned in each of the community plans. So we wanted to show this just to highlight sort of the iterative process of planning for and managing community environmental change over time, and how we learn along the way and incorporate new information into our community conversations, our aspirations, and obviously our plans. So you can definitely see the differences in the ways that different communities are thinking about these hazards, and how often we're talking about them in the way that we're developing our community plans and our goals.
And again, if you can't see the details, they're actually listed from the oldest to the most recent. So it's perhaps not surprising that the trend tends to be that there's more climate hazards as plans have been updated in more recent time. Thanks.
This is Dan Janelle, and when you say mentions, what's your measure? Is it the mentioned in the report?
Yeah, it could be either just in the background information or a stated policy to address a hazard. So it was a pretty cursory, not a cursory, it was actually a very in-depth read and keyword search, just to highlight, again, the frequency of some of the things that community is concerned about or looking to address. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, any other questions? Okay, so our first question for you here is that with this context in mind and understanding more of the project background, we want to ask you, I'll switch my slide here. We want to ask you, what are some guiding values or principles for climate change adaptation? What are the things that we should hold on to as we're continuing to develop these plans, strategies, our goals for how we adapt to climate change?
And while Menti can be a little cumbersome at this late stage in the day, again, this one is just, words. We'll move on very quickly to much more of the discussion. Like, what do these words mean for you? How do we start to think about operationalizing any of them? What does it mean to incorporate, to make a statement at a high level? But we obviously, throughout this project, want to move towards real clear action informed by these principles or some of the other strategies that you're all providing important recommendations towards. And what you're seeing represented here is a word cloud, and the sizing tends to represent the number of responses in the similar. So you can see them coming and going in different sizes over time.
Yeah, this is awesome. A lot of responses still coming in. We'll give just a couple more moments so that we can get into what some of these words mean for you, mean for this project. And this is great. This will be great to have to look back on as the project develops.
every time I try to read a word, it moves.
It
to a different
moves,
spot,
yeah.
So, except for that one in the middle, huh? And what's more important is like, you know, how do we further tease out what this can and should mean with respect to a climate adaptation strategy? So acknowledging the time, I'm going to ask Haley to move us forward into the next one, and certainly encourage people to, as you're entering your, you know, open-ended longer responses, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and just chime in on the reactions here or on this agenda item, which is discussion on climate adaptation guiding principles.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can remember all of these words on the screen right now, but I'm going to switch to the next one. And to Matt's question, what does it mean for your organization, for your network, your community, and you? What do these words mean? What does climate change adaptation mean? You're welcome to submit a long response here, but we also encourage you to share with us over our Zoom gathering if you have something you want to contribute, or even an explanation of why you chose what words you did in the word cloud.
Or even any of these responses, if you want to further explain what you mean by something, please. We're not going to try to overstep and facilitate this too much, so please chime in on your own. And I do know some of the participants or the advisory members had to leave early, and they dropped me a note that they intend to fill out the survey material as well as share with their networks. And that's, again, what we hope you're able to do. Both want to get the good participation and recommendations from you all, but help us engage with your organizations and WHOIs and community to better extend all this towards a really strong climate adaptation strategy, because we know change is coming to us, whether we like it or not. So we're trying to be proactive and intentional and maybe turn some of these bad things into opportunities for improvements as well.
Matt, you
Hey,
said be
Matt
proactive.
and gang, it's Dan Donnell. I just wanted to point out heat was the least mentioned of the issues, but heat kills the most people in the United States of any weather-related event. And I would kind of posit that it's because it's a slow kill as opposed to a hurricane or, you know, a flood that is right in front of us right then. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. And again, obviously it's hard to see all these things, so don't hesitate to chime in if you want to stress what you have already submitted or expand upon it.
Are you guys able to comment on, I saw there's a bill 65 going through city council. I think it's getting voted on tomorrow, right?
Yeah, not today here, Matt. That looks like your name. So this specific agenda item is discussion on the climate change adaptation principles. There is a next agenda item for public input for matters not on the agenda for those kinds of comments. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we'll just spend one more moment here. And please, if there's anybody that wants to elaborate on what they've written out, it'd be great to hear your voice.
As these are still rolling in, I want to, again, be respectful of time. So unless there's real specific questions for this discussion item, obviously we'll summarize this in the meeting notes and get it back to you. And this particular item, as I mentioned, will be reappearing throughout the process. So we hope to continue to rely and be supported by you all in thinking through what this can and should mean. Got some notes in the chat here too, which we'll make sure to include. Chip, is there anything you want to say on what you shared?
No, I think I was
Described it there. Yeah.
as brief and efficient as possible rather than going into a half-hour PowerPoint talk. So this will be
Yeah, we left that to me this time. Okay. Great, thank you, Haley, again. And seeing no additional questions or discussion on that agenda item, I'm going to keep us moving along. So at this stage, I know obviously, and it's a good education, I think, for those that want to participate in all these things. Just a reminder that these are the meetings of the advisory HUI, but they're open and public. So at this point, for anyone that is not a confirmed advisory HUI member, if you have comments and or input for matters not on today's agenda, please offer those either in the chat or you can unmute yourself.
I guess I'll just finish my question if that's all right. Will that bill affect your ability to make decision making around climate hazards?
So what the gentleman Matt is alluding to, there's a hearing tomorrow on Bill 65 at the Budget Committee. And if folks are interested in learning more about that, I recommend you just go to the City Council pages and look it up. And it is in reference to the duties and responsibilities of this office to continue the work that's required via the charter. So can leave it there if folks want to read about the bill. Any other items? We're so close to 6 o'clock, and I think we can do the next two rather quickly.
There's one question from Brent that maybe I'll read out, and if you have an answer for it,
okay,
in the chat. Will there be other ways that outreach is done? A strict focus on an online survey may leave out certain populations, i.e. kupuna, individuals who are houseless, and others who lack internet access.
Yeah, 100% Brent, and we hear you, and we recognize that it's a difficult time. That's one of the reasons we additionally ask that all of you assist us in better reaching out with communities. So that two-way commitment I mentioned is we are as available as possible to do things as safely as possible within the current emergency orders and tiered recovery system or recovery process. We similarly regret that we can't do as much of this in person as we would like to. Sort of TMI for this late stage in the meeting, but we had actually scheduled 14 community meetings island-wide in partnership with council members and other organizations like SHARS. And those were set to start, I think, like March the 30th, and then obviously none of that happened. So we had to reassess what we could do in this current stage. But while I don't immediately have a response to that, Brent, please don't hesitate to shoot me a note if you have recommendations, whether it's direct phone calls, preparing perhaps hard copies of this survey and distributing some of those to see if that's reasonable and can reasonably accommodate more participation. We know that online, while it opens the door for a lot, it certainly can potentially close the window for some.
Matthew, I had a quick question. And maybe
yes, David.
You take it offline. Is there any? I see the time frame. Are we looking at some kind of deadline? Do we have to get something out by a certain date, like after September next year, or is there? Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Yeah. So David's alluding to the project timeline. The motivation is ours. The motivation is to recognize the urgency, and this is the project, the contracted project. So we're making sure that we can continue in this. Yeah.
So is there like a grant? Is this tied to a grant deliverable or anything like that?
It's tied to general funds and the execution of a contracted project.
Got it.
Yep, general funds that we're part of the full scope, which was bolstered by outside funds that we solicited from grants. Great
I have a
question,
quick
David.
question, Matthew. So, and I'm going to piggyback off of David's one is, so if we're looking at this process, right, is this roadmap kind of a framework that will not have specifics by communities, but we as community cohorts, you know, within our own specific regions or areas would be able to take and use to develop our specific ones? Or does this process also allow for the growth into each community to work with your office to develop specific things for, like, for my community out here on the Hawaii Anaimoku, for Kathleen's on the North Shore, etc.?
Yeah, I hear you. So a little bit of both and all of the above. So, you know, you referenced Kathleen and the North Shore. They are about to embark on the update process of their sustainable communities plans as presented in the project overview. That still is, you know, that planning framework, which then informs functional plans and land use and zoning, is still our method by which we then propose things for legislative change and or invest in things for consistency with those community plans. This next phase, which we'll talk about a little bit at the next meeting, starts to move from some of the big island-wide considerations and understandings of the exposures and risks, and will allow us to get into a smaller subset of, smaller geographies for really looking at adaptation action strategies in these smaller action areas, and that'll be an item on the agenda next meeting.
Okay,
it's not to
thank you.
say that we will necessarily be able to have, say, one location in each of the 8 community plans, and that's part of the prioritization process in here. And we hope that it presents a model for how we can then continue to do that kind of work island-wide.
Okay, the reason I asked that is because for our Hawaii Sustainable Communities Plan, right, we have been talking about for the past 3 to 4 years on reviewing that as a community to update. And climate change, disaster and emergency preparedness, all of that had come up. And also even while we were looking at our Hawaiian Homesteads regional plans, right? So we are looking at a community-wide kind of alignment of things. So that's why I was wondering about how I see extreme value in the group that's been convened here and offered to, you know, give mana'o and inform all this that we can use in different communities as well. So I was just trying to, I guess, reassure myself as stewarding the space for my community that, you know, we'll be able to build upon this together and independently, right, of this group of your offices.
So many planning activities going on. I'm attending so many things myself as well, and it almost feels like absurd that there's all these different things and why can't we just align everything? We do know that there's iterative process. We want to, that's why we invited you all, so we can better learn what are the things you've already figured out that haven't gone anywhere. What are some of those hurdles with respect to this climate impact information? How do we partner to develop the ideas similar to the resilience strategy, which in and of itself doesn't introduce a new bill, but it alludes to the kinds of things that community, business, industry, et cetera, are concerned about and want to take action on. Yeah, and I know we're losing some folks as the meeting goes over, so I want to acknowledge that and recognize if anyone needs to go. Obviously, don't hesitate to do so. But lastly, I just wanted to wrap up with that the next meeting date has already been set, and this is to ensure that we stay consistent and aligned with the different tasks that are underway in the project itself, but definitely welcome more of a collaborative process for scheduling meetings, those next 3 meetings in the new calendar year. I admit that it was quite difficult to monitor all of the comments and preferences for timing. We will take the information and try to accommodate as many, the majority of preferences that were provided to us, and we will let you know what the final scheduled time for the Monday, November 9th meeting is. Again, it'll be held via Zoom. Maybe in the future, in the next calendar year, we can do things a little bit differently, but for the foreseeable future, we'll be proceeding in this format. Any questions on this last agenda item from the group? Okay, with that, I just wanted to say thank you all. I know this is a lot of information. We'll be getting the minutes out as soon as we can. Please remember the requirement around the Sunshine Law training. Please don't hesitate to ask us any questions. And lastly, we just ask your additional assistance in helping us to spread the word about some of these upcoming meetings, or even following us on social media, which is one of the best ways to see what's coming up next. With that, just a big mahalo to the team, a big mahalo to all of you for sticking it out for this meeting. We'll definitely strive for, fewer items and more in-depth discussion into the future, and we look forward to the meetings to come. Mahalo, everybody.
Mahalo.
Thank you.
Hello, Matt. Aloha.
Aloha.
Mahalo, Matthew. You guys did a great job this evening. So.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks,
it
Shar.
was
Not as
excellent.
good as your neighborhood board meeting, though. You run a good show with that group.
Mahalo. Aloha.
Thanks, Liz. Elizabeth.
Everyone, take care.
Bye. Did we lose Sophie?